Hello, everyone. This is Lynne Nelson from Transcona CrossFit, and we are doing another episode of Mindset of an Athlete. And I've got my returning guest speaker, Natalie Reimer Anderson, from SelfLove coach here in Winnipeg. Hi, Natalie. How's it going?
It's going really, really well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So I had texted you last week about the idea of the emotions and stresses and injuries and how it's all linked to kind of a self-worth, self-love kind of thing. And I think that that's a pretty cool idea for this episode. So thank you for coming and joining us on this one.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so how I used to do this with my old partner is I would sometimes just come up with a bunch of stuff and then throw her under the bus. So I kind of did that to you, but I did give you a little bit of a heads up earlier about what this was going to be about, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so for those of you guys who don't know, I'm just going to talk about the workshop real quick. We're doing a two-part workshop. We're doing the first one on Saturday at April 27th, and then 6 weeks later, I believe it's 6 weeks, June 3rd is the next one. I think if I've posted the wrong time slot, I think on the website I need to adjust that. So I'm going to fix it. So we're doing it June 3rd, and Natalie has so graciously decided and joined us for that, and it's going to be 2-hour sessions, I believe. Right, Natalie?
Yeah.
Okay, and so let's just quickly explain what the workshop is going to be about for those who may not have heard the last time we were together.
Sure. So basically it's going to be the tie-in of how self-love and self-care helps you to have the best life possible. And that at the foundation of all of your other relationships, including that to exercise, to food, to your body, to your family, it all starts with the foundation of self-love and the action that you take based on that.
There you go. So that's going to be really cool. I think a lot of the athletes at my gym, I'm sorry, I've got a cat here. Oops, sorry, cat. I think a lot of the athletes at the gym, and even if you're not an athlete at my gym and you guys want to come and work on some self-love, I think that it's open for everyone. And I think it's so crucial and so important for all of this to kind of come to light. So, Natalie, let's quickly talk about kind of your credentials. Self-love coach, you're a holistic nutrition, holistic? Is that what, I don't have my notes.
Yeah, so self-love coaches, I mean, what does that even mean? It's an unregulated industry. There's, you can kind of call yourself anything, but I come at it from a background of having been a high school teacher for many years, for over a decade here in the province of Manitoba. And when I had my children, I was kind of struck down with a really, really harsh, undiagnosed for quite a long time autoimmune condition. And so I knew I couldn't go back to teaching, and I really had to take care of my health. And through all of that, I started to learn about proper health care and self-care for probably the first time in my life. I had also been a high performance athlete, and I, put my body through the ringer and really pushed it in many ways. So this was the first time that it was like, whoa, my body's not responding in the way that it used to. And I knew something was up. I was really tired and lethargic. And that sort of started me on a path to that, self-realization, and that really getting down to what was at the root of the problem. So in that, I became a holistic nutritionist, and I started working a few years later while recovering my own health. I worked a few years later in a naturopathic clinic. So I have a very vast experience with that. I was also a phys ed teacher, so I have a kinesiology minor, and have a personal training certification. So I kind of, have all these different fields and all these different interests that really culminate in one thing. And the missing piece that I found was that people really need to love, honor, and care for themselves, and figure out what the blocks to that self-love are in order to have to optimize their health and to have the life that they actually want to create for themselves. Mm-hmm. So realizing, working in this clinic for many years, dealing with a lot of weight loss and stuff like that, I still was not, with those clients, getting down to the heart of what was causing the weight loss, the weight gain, or the different health habits that were leading to disease in the body. And I realized that most of the people that I was talking to, probably like 400 people in the course of a few years, all had a deficit of self-love or a lack of understanding of the importance of that relationship to self first.
Yeah.
And I, at that point, realized I know what I am and I know what this is all about. And I decided that that was how I was going to do it. And so the foundation is the self-love piece, and all of the other stuff follows that.
And I think that's great. That's such a great foundation to have. I kind of use the same philosophy at the gym. It's got to be mindset first, because everything kind of evolves from that mindset. So to the idea that we're doing today, the self-love to any injuries, I could talk quickly about the injury that I had. I had a slip disc in my lower back, and the slip disc, if you do a little bit of research, the affirmation is feeling, oh, where is it? I have it here somewhere. It's feeling unsupported. And this was when I was going through my divorce and coming out and just this whole whack of crap that was happening. And I think that that's just kind of where my body ended up blowing out. It just blew a tire there. So I was talking to you about this, and I think it's a great idea. So what is your philosophy or your ideas or your thoughts even behind maybe an injury, like a shoulder injury, or headaches, constant headaches? Like, what would you attribute some of those to, maybe of what's going on in an inner dialogue kind of way?
Okay, well, first of all, I love that you recognize that there's an energetic component to injury, because we try to compartmentalize that the body is separate from the emotions and the mind, and it just isn't. Mm-hmm. Every cell responds to your emotions. And like, I think of it as, where it all begins. So the origin of all of these things is negative emotions that are being suppressed at some point in one's life and are being trapped in the tissues. So they're actually in the body. And we're not a society that's very kind to people expressing themselves, or even to teaching children how to release and express their emotions in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. We believe that not having those emotions and hiding those emotions is how to be in this society. And it leads later in life to some very dangerous and chronic ailments. So it creates something called, dis-ease in the body. It's a lack of being at ease in the body. So if you look at, there's obvious things where we have overuse injuries because we are not practicing a proper posture, or we're not doing something technically correct, and we're reinforcing that over time if we don't learn how to do that. And then the muscle memory kicks in and can make it even worse. But those suppressed emotions, like, we have things in our body called, they're the energy centers of the body called chakras, and they kind of section out the body in different ways, different sections of the body. So you can kind of get onto where you're having your issue, sort of the weak link that's been created. So for you, you talked about having a slip disc, and then went into where that's coming from. So if we talk about where that slip disc is, we get an even greater sense of what is trapped in the body. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, you're asking very specifically about the shoulders. And so the shoulders are in your fourth chakra system, which is your heart chakra. So it's all existing in this area. And the interesting thing about the shoulders and the hands and anything that goes out from, like, this is where the heart exists, is that in utero, when your heart was being developed, so were your hands. So the concept there, and I mean, this is asking people to really stretch their way of thinking, but the concept there is that it's about embracing life, okay? And even if you think about the idea of how we use the metaphor of shoulders, like shouldering a burden. Mm-hmm. So if we think about those things, you can start to, like, chip away at the idea of what is it that's behind that could be something that you needed more. Did you need to be embraced more? Did you need to be loved and touched? Do you still need that? Is that something that has always existed inside of you and has never been satisfied? And therefore you have sort of like this wound that it doesn't go away with time. Mm-hmm. It actually gets worse with time until, as an adult, it's like led to a physical body injury, and the body's basically screaming the message to you that you need healing in this way. So the beautiful thing about, like, if we look at the body and the messages that it sends us, it is an opportunity for us to heal. Our injuries are an actual portal into our soul and our being that we can have, that we can now heal as an adult.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. Sorry, go ahead, finish.
No, I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, absolutely.
You asked about shoulders, and what you asked about one more thing.
Well, it was just as an example. Like, well, I got a bit of a list here that we can kind of go through, just as little descriptions of what we can talk about. And this is kind of just some of the injuries and some of the stuff that I have to deal with on a regular basis with some of my clients. So I thought it'd be a good time to kind of just talk about this. But I like how you said that, and how the body is like the injury leads you to the healing of it. And I actually have it in my notes here where we actually should be thankful for the injury, because it does bring that awareness to us, and it makes us aware that something is going on inside our bodies.
Yeah, it can bring that awareness if we are willing to listen.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. Right. Because a lot of people, and I think, and like you had said, like a lot of people don't necessarily associate what's going on with the injury with necessarily what's going on with our physical or energetic self. So I think this might be new to a lot of people, but I think this is a concept that people are starting to become more aware of. And if you kind of are in that, like the shoulders, when you said you're burdening something, it's kind of like the weight of the world just kind of sits on you, right? That's how I've always done it. What about like emotions? Like if we're always feeling guilty, like what would you say to someone who's always feeling guilty? Like what would you physically see first? And then what would be like some of the shit that goes on inside the body that would be like, hey, stop feeling guilty about whatever?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Guilt, resentment, shame, those are all going to definitely affect organ systems, likely the liver. It could show up in the kidneys, which is the seat of fear. There's a lot of guilt is very specific, because it's like, okay, what's the guilt coming from? Mm-hmm. And then what is the episode that occurred that created that guilt feeling? Because it would be more about dialing into like where in the chakras that occurred. Okay. So were they in their first 7 years of development when they, got this intense sense of guilt? Were they in, or had they moved into their second, 7 years? Yeah. So yeah, I would say it would very likely be liver and probably heart and blood pressure.
Blood pressure. Yeah, I have that here too. The blood pressure would usually be, because you're kind of always in that fight or flight risk, right? You're always up there. Your heartbeat's always going a little bit harder, a little bit faster. There's a whole science behind that as well, right? If I remember correctly, something with like the, what hormones always released when we're in that fight or flight? I'm trying to remember.
Like you're probably thinking of cortisol.
Yeah, that's it.
And yeah, cortisol it's a really difficult one. And I mean, ultimately this comes down to, what is the ego's purpose? What is it serving? Like ego used to protect us from making very bad decisions. Like it's kind of like our fear response. But now we have this hypervigilant fear response that's actually causing us to always be in a state of fear. And that registers in our bodies for sure. And it leads to that elevated level of stress hormone, which is cortisol, which leads to the high blood pressure, which leads to holding on to visceral fat in the abdomen. It's a nasty hormone. So, I mean, quite simply, how do you lessen that hormone in the body? You have to use some anti-stress measures, which, I mean, meditation is probably the best one, because that means tuning into the body again and into the awareness that you are safe. And so when you're connecting to your higher self, then the ego mind doesn't just get to run amok and control you. Yeah. So meditation is like one of the best ways to, because it's tapping into the truth. And the truth is you're not in danger. You're not in fear. Yeah. That's just a program that's running. Mm-hmm. That's ego. And you can actually take time to tell your ego, thank you for your service, because it has been of very great service to us as humans for a long time. And it's not that we want to get rid of ego, be egoless. We want to understand what ego serves and that it doesn't need to protect us anymore. So thank you for your service. You're not needed right now. When I need you, I'll get back to you. And then you stop listening to that voice as the voice.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because so many of us we get angry when our body's injured. We get pissed off when we can't do specific things like it because we're hurt or whatever. And I think that being grateful for specific things, being like with the ego, showing gratitude almost towards it, it almost seems like it can calm it a lot faster than being angry and throwing more anger in there, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So when you have, so if we were to have clients with the guilt, and one of the examples I can use, because I was just talking to one of my clients about this, and I hope she's okay with me bringing this up, but she was feeling a lot of guilt. She's okay buying stuff for her kids. She's okay buying stuff and letting her husband, spend $600-700 on whatever he wants. But when she wants to just go even buy like a piece of gym clothing, she feels the weight of the world and the guilt, and, it's not, she feels bad for it. And then you can actually see, like I could physically actually see while she was doing it, she would actually get a little bit flushed in the cheeks, and you could actually see her blood pressure just even going up talking about that. So in that sense, what would that be in like for the guilt and that feeling?
Well, I mean, my awareness in just listening to that story, it feels like it comes down to self-worth and deeming oneself worthy. So, I have this really beautiful process that I work through with clients, and it's about, just really understanding, like when you're feeling that, getting back into where did that come from? Where was the first time? Because these are all opportunities as adults to heal an unresolved pain and trauma that happened to us as a child. And when I say trauma, I don't mean like you had to have been abused. Yeah. Trauma shows up in many different ways, and it lives in us until we deal with it. Yeah. So if it wasn't dealt with back then, it's gonna continue showing up. If it hasn't already led to, like, this sounds like somebody who she has been valued in her life for being selfless. And there's been some kind of honor attached to being the martyr, being the selfless one. It's always about other people. Mm-hmm. And so that's also a heart chakra thing. And this is something that is very important for women, because the incidences of breast cancer, and I don't say this to put fear in anybody, but just to draw parallels between how our body's always talking to us. And if we continue to ignore it and continue to let these unresolved issues go on forever, they can result in major disease. Yeah. And if you think about, like, what we have here is an over nurturer to others, so an external giver, and not seeing the value in needing to also receive. Mm-hmm. So that can lead to a whole host of problems, especially with females. And what is our number one source of nurturance to the outside world, to our own children? It's our own bodies, especially the breasts. The breasts, their actual intention is to feed babies. So that's why we see incidences. I mean, it's multifactorial, as all these things are. So I don't want to bring them, synthesize them down to this is the reason. It's multifactorial, but this is a reason that people don't address enough. We immediately go to, toxins and all the other things, which is true, but it's not all exotoxins. There's endotoxins, things that are exist within our emotions and within our self-perception. And I believe that causes even the greater possibility of disease in the body, because you live in you. Yeah. Your emotions dance in your torso. They dance in your subconscious. Yep. So that's always something we're dealing with.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with you. I think if you keep the negative cycle within yourself, you just create your own, you create your own toxins, just like you were saying. I totally 100% absolutely buy that. So for someone like that, what would be maybe one small process that she can do to maybe kind of go through that? And then I also had a question for you from one of my clients, and then we can kind of wrap things up from there. But So what's one thing that she can do to maybe gain a little bit of that self-worth back, to say it's okay to go buy myself a pair of Under Armour pants, you know, who cares if it was $50 kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's definitely a start. Like that's a very simple and practical thing, right? To go and do that. I don't know if that would make her feel probably very terrible about herself. Yeah. So to, you know, that maybe go deeper would be to try to find where she first felt that sense of unworthiness. Because what we're dealing with here is a deeply embedded program.
Yep.
And that usually happens in the 0 to 7 years of age, early childhood. So when she's feeling that feeling, where did she get that idea about herself not being worthy, about needing to do for others? Like that's a very codependent way of existing, where your value is attached to how everybody else feels. So, you know, there is no really simple way to do it, but to be able to first identify the program. Where did it come from? Is it serving her? If not, there's many ways to take steps to deprogram that idea. Mm-hmm. And it usually doesn't happen overnight, because for most people, it's been 30, 40 years of existing in that program. And I think the most important thing that she could start doing, and I had the great privilege this past Monday of seeing, I'm just losing his name, Gabor Mate, who is an addictions doctor, specialist therapist. And he made this beautiful comment about, as human beings, we need two things. We need attachment and we need authenticity. When we were children, attachment meant survival. So we were attached to our families, our parents specifically. And even if they were horrible to us, and I'm not saying this is this person's case, but even if there was things happening that could damage that attachment, that meant our survival. So we made ourselves bad and we made ourselves wrong, rather than thinking that the two, you know, or the parents who in our life were our gods, yeah, and meant our very survival, that they could be wrong. So now we go through life and we still have this idea about us being wrong. So when we were kids, you know, kids are just authentic. They're authentic. They are who they are until the world gets a hold of them and programs them and changes and tells them what parts of them are right yeah, or wrong. So then as we become adults, if we still have these negative ideas about attachment, then we will attach to things and people to try to define us and to try to validate us at the expense of our own authenticity. And that ends up making us sick and killing us, really. We're slowly killing ourselves by denying our authenticity to continue to attach to things as adults that don't serve us. So the first question, the most important question you can ask with anything in life, including how much you participate at the gym, how hard you go, even though your body's telling you something else, is this authentically right for me? Is this my authentic self showing up? Is this for my highest good? Is this authentically what I desire? And as you keep asking that question, you start to get the answers. And if you listen, those answers will start to be louder and louder. And you need to listen and then act upon that. And you'll find yourself detaching from people and things that are no longer, or that you realize have not been serving you. Yeah, and those include behaviors. Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they become draining.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's exhausting to keep up that charade. And as adults, you don't even realize how we still seek attachment. Well, you're an adult now. You're not going to die. Okay, mm-hmm. That's the first thing. It's not going to kill you. As a child, you had that belief. We still have this tribal mentality, you know, where we had to be very closely attached and we had to have value in a tribe in order to survive. Yep. Children still do need that. That's true. but we still hold on to the idea of needing to be attached as adults, when really it's authenticity that should be taking over for that.
Yeah, it's we're so programmed in a world where authentic people are we're so frowned upon. And I mean, as authentic as we all can be, I think we're still kind of put different masks on for different people. And I mean, it's just kind of how things are. I think though, if you can let the core of who you really are shine out, I think that you kind of end up winning at the end of the day with that. Do you know what I mean with that? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think, like, that's so true. And giving, being somebody that's a sovereign being that self-regulates and that answers their own needs, that doesn't mean, and this is the thing for women, that does not mean that you're suddenly not also caring for others in your life, or that you just become like, a lot of people think self-love it has this inherent selfishness to it. But the more that you can take care of your own needs, the more you're modeling that, especially if you have children in your life. You're a good person. You're inherently a good and loving person. So that won't just fly out the window because you also choose to take care of yourself. Yep. Having that ability to say no, then you're also allowing other people to step up and become more giving in their own life. And that continues that whole cycle of like giving and receiving, which is necessary for everybody to have balance with. Yeah. So if you're being a giver all the time, you can actually look at that, and I'm just going to spin this a little bit. That can be seen as a selfish thing in the grand scheme, because you are not allowing other people to show up as givers also. Yeah. They're always going to be on the receiving end, and that has its own set. It's the same, two ends of the same spectrum. Yeah. It has its own set of issues that develop over time if all you are is in receiving mode.
It's funny that you say that, because I was actually, I pretty much almost said the same thing, that the people that are always giving, you're almost too selfish in that sense, that you don't allow the receiving coming back to you. You just completely block it off. And as givers, we want to be able to give back for those who gave us something, right? So that's awesome that you said that. It totally just validated that conversation. So I have a client who texted in a little while ago, and she wanted to talk about self-sabotage and ways or tips to help kind of stop doing it. So either with the nutrition, people who nutrition is the big one, and this we can talk more when we're at the workshop, but self-sabotage and maybe little tips to help. Like if you feel like you're gorging on food, or if you're beating yourself up with words, like what are the little tips and tricks that we could talk about with self-sabotage?
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Self-sabotage. So the most important thing to be asking oneself there is, what is the perceived payoff? Why? What do you perceive you are getting from it or protecting yourself from? And I gave you a little clue there, because that idea of you're protecting yourself from something, essentially. So what is it that you are perceiving to be protecting yourself from? And then you want to get really honest with the answers that come up. So if you're actually asking that, because again, this is that time when the ego is this hypervigilant thing that will try to protect you. Yeah. So, I'm gonna give an example. So let's say it has to do with weight loss. Someone feels like they're sabotaging their progress with weight loss. Often the perceived payoff when they, overconsume food or overindulge is not really inherent or visible to them. It's deeper. It's much deeper than that. Mm. So just simply asking, like, what am I fearful of in having success with this? What am I feeling like I'm actually letting go of? What do I perceive is going to change and shift? Because this is just fear. Self-sabotaging is just a fear response. Again, it's multifactorial, because if we're talking about, if they have a food addiction, then that goes deeper into why does one have a food addiction and where is that stemming from? So that's like a whole another issue. Yeah. But yeah, just basically asking those questions. We rarely stop to think about it and to listen for the own answers that our higher self will bring to us if we stop and ask. Mm-hmm. So that would be the thing that I would first do. I mean, not knowing this person's situation, it's hard to get into a lot of details about it, but yeah, it's like, so when I'll go back to the overindulgence in food thing. What are we medicating? What are we soothing? What are we trying to run from?
Yeah.
So it's asking the deeper level questions.
Yeah.
And then quite simply, junk food or there's addictive properties to it. So, you never see somebody overindulge on healthy food, right?
Yeah. No.
So there's, like I said, there's a lot of things going on here. I'm not sure if that answers the question, because it's actually a really complex question with really complex answers.
Yeah, I mean, it goes into, and the self-sabotage, like you said, it could be a million different reasons and a million different things, but I think that that's all what you said. It's all fear-based, because I can tell you, before I got my gym, like, the thing that kept stopping me was the price hike in my rent, or, having to get more clients, or having to do this. And then it really keeps you small. So you start to sabotage it in the sense that you don't do the work, or and so if we go to the weight loss, sometimes people really fear becoming vulnerable, because now you're not protected by that weight. And then you really get to see who you are. That's like that sense of exposure.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to be showing up differently in the world, and, definitely in a different, you're not in the comfort zone anymore. And it's an unfamiliar place. And I mean, you just touched on something that's definitely one of the reasons that, people can put on weight, is to add protective layers basically to their wounded self.
Yep.
That's not the case with everybody, but I do find that a lot of people that have been dealing with it for a long, long time in life, we can get them back to a point where they can identify when they started gaining weight and the incident that occurred that implanted a belief system that they're still living from today.
Yeah.
That's causing them great pain. And then when we can go back in and do the whole reveal it to heal it, and I can help them through the process of bringing that to light and understanding it for what it is, then the weight releasing, you start releasing what doesn't serve you, which in many cases is any extra weight that's been hanging on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, it all stems from something. And maybe real quick, the people who do lose the weight. So I've had clients who say, well, I've done this, I've lost 60 pounds and then I gained 100 back and blah, 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 blah. So that yo-yo going back and forth, maybe what's your thought on it? Is it because they haven't dealt with the issue of the first time, or is it just, again, that self-sabotage, oh, I'm too exposed, kind of got to get back in my shell kind of thing? Like, so what's your thoughts on that part?
It's going to be case by case basis, but I can speak to, what can generally occur. And that is that, yes, if people are treating a symptom, then you can lose all the weight you want and it's going to come back on, because treating symptoms is not how to cure oneself and be done with it. So, I have worked with people that have, yo-yo dieted and lost weight and gained it all back. And it's like, it comes down to what is the motivation? That's why, again, this, like, I left the clinic. I loved my job there, but I knew that I wasn't being able to stand in the full truth of what I came to know, not just even believe, but to know. And that is that it comes down to the self-love. It comes down to learning choices and making choices every
Oh, I think we got a little technical glitch there where we lost Natalie. I'm not sure if we're even on, but I'll just finish up to finish up with Natalie there, unless she happens to come back on before. The self-love is, and the mindset of self, it really does stem from everything. And if you guys are lacking, or if it's a missing link, it's something that you guys definitely want to look into. On Saturday, I'm just going to double check to see if she texted me here. So on Saturday, April 27th, we're doing the self-love workshop. Natalie is hosting it. It's going to be 2 hours. And then 6 weeks later, after you have 6 weeks to do some homework, we are going to meet up on June 3rd again. We're going to go this is going to go down at the gym. So it's Unit 150 Matheson Parkway. It's $50 for both sessions. I highly recommend it. If you've never seen Natalie speak, or if you have, you can't miss this, and you can't miss the homework, and you can't miss what it's going to do for you, because there's no limit of what this can actually do. You're going to open yourself to a whole new set of doors here, guys. All right. So that was Mindset of an Athlete. I want to thank Natalie. Sorry for the glitch in the system. Not sure what happened there, but it was a great session. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. Join us again. I'm going to have a couple different guests on the next episode. We'll keep promoting that. So if you guys are interested, also 17.3, the CrossFit opens. It goes down Friday at 6:15 p.m. Again at the gym. So if you guys want to come cheer on the athletes, we are all going to be there. All right, guys. I hope you have a great day. I hope you enjoyed the session, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye. Hey.